Everything about our brand is about accessibility and enjoying all of your life, not just saving it for weekends or your vacation or your retirement.
There is something quietly devastating about watching someone you love struggle in ways they cannot fully explain. For John Cusimano, the man who has stood beside Rachael Ray for over 2 decades, that quiet devastation has become a defining backdrop of his daily life. Rachael Ray, the woman who built a culinary empire on warmth, accessibility, and an infectious love of feeding people, has in recent years found herself at the center of growing public concern that her husband has had to navigate with grace, patience, and a very particular kind of private grief. This is not a story about the end of a marriage. It is a story about something far more complex, the weight of love tested by time, health scares, and the relentless pressure of a life lived entirely in the public eye. It is a story about a man learning, day by day, to hold on tighter even when the future feels uncertain. Long before the health concerns and the viral videos that left fans unsettled, Rachael Ray was simply the woman who made Tuesday night dinners feel achievable. Born on August 25, 1968, in Glens Falls, New York, Rachael grew up surrounded by food in the most literal sense. Her mother, Elsa Scuderi, came from a Sicilian family with deep culinary roots, and Rachael absorbed that heritage the way children absorb language, unconsciously, completely, and with lifelong effect. The family eventually settled near Lake George, New York, where they operated several restaurants that became fixtures in the community. For young Rachael, the restaurant world was not glamorous. It was loud, demanding, and relentlessly physical work. But it was also the place where she first understood what food could do for people, the way a well-made meal could dissolve the distance between strangers or restore something depleted in the people you love. After graduating from Lake George Junior-Senior High School, Rachael moved to New York City in the hopes of carving out something larger for herself. She found work at the candy counter of Macy's department store, and her talent and hustle eventually earned her a promotion to manage the store's gourmet food section. It was a formative period, one that exposed her to the premium end of the food world and deepened her palate considerably. But the city also brought trauma. In 1997, while living in a Woodside, Queens apartment, Rachael was mugged twice in the same week by the same attacker. The first time, she managed to use mace to escape. The second time, she was not so fortunate. The assailant dragged her into an alley and beat her with his gun. It was a shattering experience that ended her chapter in New York City. She packed up and returned to the Adirondacks, determined to start again. That return home was, in retrospect, the pivot point of her entire career. She took a management role at the Sagamore Resort in Bolton Landing, New York, overseeing its restaurants and food and beverage operations. It was there that she noticed something that would eventually transform her life. Everyday people were intimidated by cooking. They wanted to feed their families well, but didn't know where to start. Rachael responded by launching a series of informal cooking classes built around the concept of preparing a complete meal in 30 minutes. The classes filled up. Word spread. A local television station, WRGB, caught wind of what she was doing and invited her to present cooking segments on their programming. She was a natural, unpretentious, funny, genuinely enthusiastic. Audiences responded immediately. The Food Network came calling not long after. When 30-minute meals debuted on the network in 2001, it was unlike anything else on the schedule. Rachael did not lecture. She did not perform. She simply cooked the way a good friend might cook for you, talking through what she was doing, cracking jokes, moving with comfortable confidence. The show ran for an extraordinary 27 seasons and fundamentally altered how American home cooks thought about weeknight dinners. By 2006, Rachael had expanded into a syndicated daytime talk show, simply titled Rachael Ray, produced by Oprah Winfrey's Harpo Productions and distributed by CBS. It ran for 17 seasons, winning multiple Daytime Emmy Awards along the way. She launched a lifestyle magazine, Every Day with Rachael Ray, that same year, and in 2008, she introduced the Nutrish pet food line, with all proceeds benefiting animal rescue organizations. By any reasonable measure, Rachael Ray had built one of the most expansive and beloved brands in the history of American food media. Through all of it, every show, every cookbook launch, every charity initiative, there was John. John Michael Cusimano was born on August 19, 1967, in New York, and from the beginning, he was a man of unusual range. He pursued a law degree at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law in New York City, specializing in entertainment law, a field that placed him at the intersection of two worlds he genuinely loved, the legal system and the arts. He was good at the law, methodical and sharp, but his heart had always lived closer to music. He had been accepted to the Berklee College of Music in Boston, a remarkable achievement in itself, but at the urging of his family, who worried about the instability of a music career, he chose law school instead. It was a compromise he carried quietly for years. Music eventually found its way back in. In the early 2000s, John formed The Cringe, an indie rock band in which he served as lead vocalist and rhythm guitarist. The band developed a devoted following in the New York club scene and achieved something most bands only dream about. They opened for major acts including Motley Crue, Steel Panther, and the New York Dolls. John poured genuine artistic energy into The Cringe, and the band released several albums over the years. But by his own admission, something deeper was always there, an unspoken wish that the music might have taken him to arenas rather than clubs. On a 2024 episode of Rachel's podcast, she described how John had once confided that he believed he could have become the next great rock star, and there was something achingly sincere in the telling. It was in 2001, at a mutual friend's birthday party, that John met Rachael. They were introduced through a friend who had been quietly trying to bring them together for the better part of a year. When they finally crossed paths, something clicked immediately and completely. They talked until 4 in the morning. Rachael later recalled the moment with characteristic directness. They crossed a crowded room, started talking, and had not stopped talking since. After several years together, they married on September 24, 2005, at the Castello di Vallona, a stunning castle estate in Montalcino, in the heart of Tuscany. It was a setting that could not have been more appropriate for two people who shared a deep and abiding love of Italian food, culture, and landscape. Over the years that followed, John gradually stepped back from his law practice in the traditional sense. As Rachael's empire expanded, he became the full-time legal and business partner behind her brand. He once described it with characteristic wry humor. He used to have a roster of clients in film entertainment law. Then he met Rachael, and now he has exactly one client. Rachael, for her part, called it the smartest decision she ever made. On camera, John was a warm and easy presence, mixing cocktails on Rachael's shows, joining her on culinary adventures in Italy and elsewhere, always positioned slightly apart from the spotlight, but never entirely outside of it. He was her rock, her business partner, her fiercest advocate, and her most honest critic. Their 20th wedding anniversary arrived in September 2025, and by all accounts, they were still very much together, still very much committed, and still very much navigating life with the same combination of passion and practicality that had defined them from the beginning. For the millions of people who had followed Rachael Ray across 20-plus years of television, the first truly unsettling moment came without warning in September 2024. Rachael posted a video to her Instagram account in honor of the late Tony Bennett, preparing his favorite dish, ossobuco, a slow-braised Milanese specialty she had made many times before. But something in the video felt wrong. Fans watching closely noticed that Rachael appeared to be slurring her speech. Her mouth moved with an unusual quality, and her articulation was noticeably impaired compared to the woman they had watched with such familiarity for so many years. The comment section filled quickly. Some fans rallied to her defense, dismissing the concern as overblown, while others wrote more openly about their worry. The video spread widely. Media outlets picked it up. The question hung in the air without an answer. What was happening to Rachael Ray? She did not address the video directly, not at first. Rachael has never been someone who manages her public image through calculated silence. She is, by nature and by brand, someone who talks. The absence of an explanation only deepened the concern. Then, on October 22, 2024, she launched a new podcast titled I'll Sleep When I'm Dead, a title that, in hindsight, carries a certain charged meaning given the circumstances surrounding its debut. In the premiere episode, joined by actress Jenny Mollen, Rachael was articulate and upbeat. She spoke with characteristic energy about how much she loves the texture of domestic life, chores, cooking, physical labor, the satisfaction of carrying wood. She told listeners that she and John have a playful competition about who can haul more. But then, she let something slip. She had, she said, suffered a couple of bad falls in recent weeks. Nothing dramatic was offered by way of context. She mentioned the falls almost in passing, as a brief explanation for why she had been unable to do some of her favorite physical chores. She did not elaborate. It was not, in itself, an alarming disclosure. People fall. But coming 1 month after the disturbing Instagram video, and in the context of a public figure who had become noticeably more withdrawn from her usual platforms, the revelation carried weight it might not have otherwise. Something was clearly off, and the piece-by-piece nature of the admissions made the picture more unsettling rather than less. In February 2025, a new Instagram clip surfaced that once again sent fans to the comment section with worried observations. In the video, Rachael held up two bowls above her head, made a light-hearted remark comparing herself to Princess Leia, then followed it with a sudden, disjointed reference to Batman. The non-sequitur quality of the moment, the way it seemed to belong to a different conversation entirely, struck many viewers as strange and out of character. One commenter wrote plainly, "What happened to this lady?" Others offered prayers. The concern was no longer a ripple. It had become a wave. It is important in understanding the current moment to understand that Rachael Ray's body has never been entirely cooperative. The health struggles she has faced over her lifetime are not new. They are a thread running through the whole of her story, often invisible to those watching from the outside, but always present beneath the surface. She has spoken openly on multiple occasions about the chronic problems she has had with her voice. As a child, she suffered recurring bouts of croup, a respiratory infection that causes severe inflammation in the upper airway and produces a harsh, distinctive cough. The condition left lasting damage. Her vocal cords, she has explained, were never quite what they should be. Throughout her adult life, she lost her voice regularly and sometimes for extended periods, a particular cruelty for a woman whose entire professional identity was built on speaking. Doctors gave her exercises and told her to avoid caffeine. The advice helped, but the problem persisted. In October 2008, the National Enquirer published a story claiming that Rachael had been diagnosed with throat cancer and would require surgery that might leave her unable to speak for months. The story generated immediate panic among her fan base, and the tabloid followed it with a second report claiming that cancer cells had been detected on her vocal cords. Neither claim was true. Rachael's representative, Charlie DiGiello, moved quickly to clarify the situation. What Rachael actually had was a benign cyst on one of her vocal cords, a common condition that required a straightforward outpatient procedure. The surgery was performed in early December 2008 and was uncomplicated. She took a brief recovery break and was back on air almost immediately, her voice intact and her spirits, by all accounts, largely unaffected. The cancer scare had been frightening, but the reality was far more manageable than the tabloid headlines had suggested. She even turned the recovery into something productive, taking up jogging during the quiet weeks of vocal rest and finding, to her own surprise, that she loved it. There have been other losses along the way, too, losses that belong not to Rachael's body, but to the wider geography of her life and John's. In 2013, Rachael's aunt, Geraldine Dominica Scuderi, died in a heartbreaking accident while house-sitting at Rachael's property in Lake Luzerne, New York. On a freezing November day, Geraldine stepped outside to feed birds and accidentally locked herself out of the house. Unable to get back in and unable to reach anyone, she collapsed outside in the plummeting temperatures and was found the next day, having died of hypothermia. The tragedy fractured the family. Some relatives pointed fingers at Rachael for not ensuring her aunt had a spare key. Work obligations prevented Rachael from attending the funeral, and that absence deepened the wound. Rachael pushed through the grief, as she pushed through everything, but losses of that kind do not dissolve with time. They settle into a person and stay. Then came the fire. In August 2020, an ember from the chimney of their upstate New York home landed on the roof and ignited. The house burned. For Rachael, the loss was staggering. 15 years of memories, 40 years of notebooks, recipes, handwritten thoughts, the accumulated material evidence of her creative life. The home was eventually rebuilt, and they moved back in the following year. But barely had they settled in again when Hurricane Ida brought severe flooding to their New York City apartment, damaging it extensively. It was like the apartment just literally melted, like in Wicked or something, she told people at the time. And in March 2024, John suffered one of the most personal losses of all. His mother passed away. He shared the news on Instagram with a tribute that was direct and tender. "My mom was so cool," he wrote. "She was a badass and force of nature. I miss her so much." It was another blow, and it was John's to carry. For John Cusimano, the period spanning late 2024 into 2025 has been one of heightened vigilance. He has watched his wife, a woman who defined herself by ceaseless motion, who titled her own podcast after the idea of refusing to rest, become the subject of widespread worry. He has watched videos go viral, read the comment sections he probably knows better than to read, and continued to stand beside her at public appearances with the quiet stability that has always defined his role in their partnership. When they appeared together at the Food Network New York City Wine and Food Festival in October 2024, just days before Rachael launched her podcast, they presented a united front. They were on stage together, warm and easy in each other's company, hosting the annual Burger Bash competition that Rachael had anchored for years. To anyone watching, it might have looked like nothing had changed. But the question of what John carries privately, in the spaces between public appearances, is one that only he could fully answer. What is documented, and what Rachael herself has shared, is that their marriage is not a serene or quiet one. It is passionate, combustible, and deeply honest. In October 2024, Rachael revealed on her podcast that she and John have what she called huge screaming matches all the time. She was not apologetic about it. She described it as healthy, as evidence of two people who are fully alive to each other and to the relationship. An insider speaking to Closer weekly later described their dynamic as one of two strong-willed, hot-tempered people who resolve conflict not through gentle conversation but through full-throated argument, and then a kind of wordless reconciliation, a pat on the back, a kiss on the head. No formal apologies. Just the understanding that the storm has passed. That kind of relationship requires an unusual degree of mutual trust. And it also means that when something is genuinely wrong, both parties tend to feel it before it is spoken. John has spent 20 years learning Rachael's rhythms, when she is tired versus when she is depleted, when she is pushing through versus when she is struggling. He was with her when the house burned. He was with her when the floods came. He has watched her grieve, recover, rebuild, and push forward more times than most people experience in a lifetime. Which is why the current concern feels different. Is not a tabloid rumor or an isolated incident. Is a pattern of small signals, an unusual video, a mention of falls, a behavioral oddness in a subsequent clip that taken together suggests something that has not yet been fully named or publicly explained. In a 2025 interview with Page 6, Rachael was notably defiant about claims that she had stepped back from her career or disappeared from public life. "I don't know what they're talking about," she said bluntly. "I work my butt off all the time. And I never left. I just switched over to A+E and new partners, that's all. But I've been working constantly." The defiance was vintage Rachael, direct, slightly irritated, completely unwilling to be cast as diminished. She hosts Rachael Ray's Meals in Minutes and Rachael Ray in Tuscany, both of which continued to air on FYI as she moved into her partnership with A+E Networks. She has been working. She has not vanished. But she has, undeniably, been quieter, and the moments that have broken through the quiet have often carried an anxious charge. Rachael and John's love story is worth telling in full, because it is the context without which the current moment cannot be properly understood. They met at that party in 2001, talked through the night, and have been, in Rachael's words, talking every day since. They married in Tuscany in 2005 at a castle vineyard in Montalcino, in the same landscape where Rachael's mother's family had their roots and where John's parents' families had come from as well. Italy has been, from the beginning, more than a travel destination for them. It is a piece of their shared identity. They returned to that same Tuscan castle in 2015 to renew their vows on their 10th anniversary, surrounded by close friends including Di Fieri and Burrell and Ken Oringer. They have chosen not to have children, a decision they made together and have been candid about over the years. Rachael has spoken plainly about it. She works too much to be the parent she would want to be. What they have instead is a life of shared purpose. The brand, the animals, the food, the travel, the music, the charity work, the dogs they have loved and mourned. Their dog Isabu, a pit bull who appeared frequently on Rachael's shows and became something of a celebrity herself, died in 2020. They now have a dog named Bella, whom John described in a birthday tribute to Rachael as the most wonderful daddy of Bella. Small things, but they are the fabric of a real life. John has also navigated with a certain quiet dignity the tabloid scrutiny that came with being married to one of the most visible women in American television. In 2006, the National Enquirer published claims about extramarital conduct involving Cusimano, allegations that were denied by both John and Rachael, and which their representatives described as fabricated. A spokesperson for the couple called the reporting obvious in its fabrication and noted the human cost of such stories. It's just sad when they take unwarranted shots at the people you care about the most. The tabloid stood by its account, but the story eventually faded, as these things tend to do, leaving behind only the residue that any public accusation leaves, a footnote in a narrative that the couple have consistently refused to let define them.